Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. It's Tuesday. That means open forum. Both hours will be open forum today. I'm Cy Kellett, your host on this Thanksgiving week. So much to be thankful for, and today we can be thankful for two very fine guests. Second hour, Jim Blackburn will be here with us. That will be open forum. And first hour, our own Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And I've got two brand new books by Jimmy Akin right here in my hot little hand. Hi, Jimmy Akin.
Hi, Cy Kellett. How's it going in your hot little hand?
It's going very, very well. Congratulations on the two books. They look beautiful.
Thank you. I can't take credit for the cover designs, but I can take credit for the content inside.
20 Answers, the End Times, out now.
Mm-hmm.
And then also Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It by Jimmy Akin, brand new from Catholic Answers Press.
Yeah.
This I have to say, the Words of Eternal Life one looks like one that could be around for, generations. Like it could be like, it looks like something you could hand to someone and say, here, this is what it's all about. And for that reason, it looks like something you could just print millions of copies of, and it could become something that, is of great value to generations.
Well, that was more or less the idea. For the last 27 years, Catholic Answers has been printing a booklet that's been very successful and that we have distributed millions of copies of, called Pillar of Fire, Pillar of Truth, which is kind of written to reinforce Catholic's faith. It was originally written for young people at World Youth Day in 1993. To bolster their Catholic faith at that time of life. And it's been very successful, but it's written in a way that presupposes it's being given to a Catholic. And we wanted something that can be given to a Catholic, but that can also be given to anybody, whether they're a former Catholic or a non-Catholic Christian or a non-Christian. And so I was asked to write the Words of Eternal Life, and it basically makes a case for the Christian faith in general and for the Catholic faith specifically. It starts with some arguments for God's existence that are very simple and very easy to understand, that anybody can read. It makes the case for Jesus Christ, and it makes the case for his church.
Well, congratulations on it, Jimmy. I hope that it does turn out to be something that's as valuable and goes on for as long as a Pillar of Fire, Pillar of Truth. Our number, by the way.
And like Pillar of Fire, Pillar of Truth, it's meant to be distributed in bulk. So there will be bulk copies available at a significant discount, so you can get a bunch and hand them out. If
at your parish there's going to be masses this Christmas, and just lots of people come to Christmas Mass. Many who are not Christian will come to Christmas Mass. If you wanted to get this for your parish, you could. Will they have it bulk availability for Christmas this year, Jimmy, or would?
That's my understanding. I mean, it comes in bulk cases already. So
yeah, it's in recent years, parishes have started giving out a book at Christmas. This is the perfect one to just put in everybody's hand. If that finds its way into homes, lots of people will find what they're looking for there. But that's good. Well, great. Congratulations, Jimmy.
Thank you.
888-318-7884, our number here. Open forum means open to anybody. And if you'd like to know about true happiness and where to find it, which is the subtitle of Jimmy's new book, The Words of Eternal Life, you can call and ask that. What's true happiness and where can I find it? Or maybe you have a particular theological question or a moral question or a faith and science question or just a plain old science question. Jimmy will take anything. 888-318-7884. Before I even gave out the number, the lines were full. I think people must remember the number. When Jimmy's on, they're like, I don't know, I'm just dial now. So let's go straight to the phones. Noah in Westmont, Illinois, watching on YouTube Live. Noah, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Happy to have you.
I've been doing a lot of research into Communion of the Saints lately. I understand that the practice isn't meant to be any form of worship or anything, or not meant to be any kind of deification of saints, as a lot of people have said. My hesitation that I still have with the practice comes when there's a lot of statements that would almost seem like they would be aiming at that kind of thing. Not that I'm assuming that, but as I know there's statements in the Rosary, like, you're our human nature's solitary boast, or things like that. And I know there's a lot of poems by William Wordsworth that say that kind of thing. I know Catholics also say they have devotion to saints. I'm wondering, ultimately, just how do you approach praying to the saints, specifically regarding those questions, but also in general, specifically regarding those things, but also in general, how do you approach it in a way that doesn't deify them or doesn't over-glorify them?
Thank you, Noah.
Okay, so in terms of how I do it, and this is, I think, representative of Catholics, at least certainly Catholics who are informed about their faith, I recognize what the saints are. They're fellow human beings. Now, they are in heaven, and so they have some benefits that we don't have in this life, but that all of us who die in God's friendship will one day have. But they're still fellow human beings. They're creatures. They're finite. They aren't deities, and consequently, as long as I don't think that they are divine, then I'm not treating them as divine. In the case of Mary, you mentioned a particular line that's somehow used. Now, it's not actually part of a standard rosary, but you do have some people will describe Mary as our fallen nature's solitary boast. That you'll notice puts her on the side of us human beings, because it's attributing to her our human nature. But she, by God's grace, was not fallen the way the rest of us are, and so she is something that poetically you could speak of as a boast, rather than as being as fallen as the rest of us. Not a boast in an arrogant sense, but it's something that is valuable and different from everything else in this category. But it still puts her in the category of us human beings. And so as long as we recognize what the saints are, there's no deification, there's no idolatry going on, because they're just fellow human beings. They may be in a glorified state, but all of us can enter that glorified state one day. It'll be better than the state we're in right now, but it'll still be finite, because as created beings, our natures are intrinsically limited, and so we'll never cross over into being uncreated, infinite beings like God is. We'll always be finite created beings. So when I approach the saints in prayer and ask for their intercession, I'm simply asking fellow Christians in heaven to be my prayer partners, just like I would ask fellow Christians here on earth to be my prayer partners and pray for me.
Thanks, Noah. Thanks for getting us started on Open Forum. It is Open Forum with Jimmy Akin this hour. Up next, Austin in New York, watching on YouTube Live. Austin, go ahead with your question.
Hi, my question is, how is Christian perfection different from holiness or like sanctification or justification? Because it seems like one of those, because it has to do with like a union and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So these concepts, Christian perfection and Christian holiness and sanctification, they all converge on the same thing, which is living one's life in a way that is made holy by God's grace, or made sacred or sanctified by God's grace. And how they specifically relate to each other will depend on the context in which you're encountering these terms. Now, sometimes holiness does not have an ethical component. For example, in the Old Testament, you will find that the high priest is holy to the Lord simply by virtue of his position, simply by virtue of the fact that he's been appointed the high priest. He is set apart to a sacred function, namely serving as high priest. But that doesn't tell you anything about, is he a moral guy or not? You could have wicked high priests, or high priests that were bad, like Eli or Caiaphas. And consequently, there's not an automatic coupling between what you could call positional holiness, which the high priest has by virtue of his position or his role, and moral holiness. Now, the two should go together, people who have positional holiness should also have moral holiness, but you don't necessarily have them both together, as cases like Caiaphas or Eli would have. Other people besides the high priest would also have positional holiness. The other priests had one kind of it, the Levites had another kind of it, and all of the people of Israel had a certain position of holiness or positional holiness by virtue of the fact that as a people, they were consecrated to God. The same is true of Christians. By virtue of our baptism, we're consecrated to God, and so we also have a kind of positional holiness. But the kind of holiness that God is most interested in is not the positional kind, it's the moral kind. And he wants us to live moral lives, lives of holiness, lives where we perform sacred things, acts of love and kindness. And he gives us his grace to enable us to do that. Some people make a special commitment to try to live lives of Christian holiness. Now, Jesus exhorts us to try to live in a way that makes our holiness complete. In reality, because of our fallen nature, we're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to fall short of that standard. But some people take special vows to attempt to live in as holy a manner as possible and to be as perfect as possible. And so you'll have monks and nuns sometimes who have taken such vows sometimes describe what they're trying to live as Christian holiness. At least they're striving to live a life of Christian holiness or Christian perfection. The term perfection, though, also occurs in other contexts outside the Catholic Church. For example, as an outgrowth of the Wesleyan movement in Protestantism, there's what's known as the holiness movement, and Wesleyans and holiness and some Pentecostal people that also come from that tradition will also talk about living a life of Christian perfection, and that sometimes causes some confusion in the Protestant community, where people will say, well, how can you really live in a perfect way? Are you claiming sinless perfection? And their answer to that is no, we're not really claiming sinless perfection. That's not possible in this life. But they believe that by God's grace, you can achieve a level of holiness that is much closer to perfection than where you started.
Austin, thank you for that question. It is open forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Black Friday is just around the corner, but you don't have to wait that long to save money today. Only at shop.catholic.com, we're offering the very best deals with our popular 2 for Tuesday specials. It's a great way to stock up on gifts for friends and family and save money at the same time. And while you're at the shop, be sure to check out our Wish Book category for lots of great deals that can save you up to 50% and more. That's shop.catholic.com.
Catholic Answers Live.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Unplanned, the true story of Abby Johnson.
I would be the youngest director in Planned Parenthood history.
She believed in a woman's right to choose.
I've had an abortion myself, so I don't have any problem with another woman making the same decision.
Until the day she saw something that changed everything.
Tiny, perfect little baby. And then it was just gone.
Now she's pulling back the curtain on the abortion industry. Unplanned.
Available at EWTNRC.com and the EWTN app.
Open Forum. 2 hours of open forum, as a matter of fact, today on Catholic Answers Live. You can call with any question you've got. Second hour, Jim Blackburn will be here with us. This hour, we've got Jimmy Akin with us. the author of a couple of brand new books, which it's always exciting to see the new books come out here at Catholic Answers when they bring them around. And today on my desk, I found The End Times, 20 Answers, The End Times, Jimmy Akin's new 20 Answers book, and The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. Both brand new from Jimmy Akin. I'm sure you can find them right now at shop.catholic.com. Up next for Jimmy is Marnie in Tennessee, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Hi, Marnie. You got a question for Jimmy?
Hi, yes. I just wanted to say before I start that I'm a convert, and I'm reading the Bible as a Catholic book, and it is so helpful in learning about our faith.
Well, thank you, Marnie. Those are nice words for Jimmy's other latest book.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
My question today is, with our obvious goal being heaven, we are called to detachment from the world. And because of this, I sometimes feel bad enjoying certain things in the life, like music, movies, food. And my question would be, by enjoying friends, food, and art and stuff like that, am I attaching myself to the world in an unhealthy way?
Not based on the description you've offered. One of the things that you'll find in Scripture is a recurring theme, right actually from the very beginning, from the very first chapter of the Bible, that indicates God made the world good. And it's appropriate to appreciate good things that God has made, good things that God has enabled humans to make. There's a passage, I believe, in the Psalms that talks about how craftsmen rejoice in the things that they've made. Let's say you're a craftsman and you make a new chair, and you can admire that chair and say, wow, this is a really good chair. I'm so happy I made this. We have other passages that talk about how God made foods for man to enjoy and drinks for man to enjoy and all kinds of different things. So there's nothing wrong with taking pleasure in the things that God has made and the things that God has given us and the things that God has enabled us to make for ourselves, like art and music and stories. There's nothing wrong with that. The issue is when one becomes too attached to those things, to where one starts putting those things above God and above other important things that we should do. Like maybe just to take an example, a lot of people are really into video games right now. Okay, that's fine. Video games are fine. Playing video games is fine in principle. You can enjoy playing video games. But if you spend all your time playing video games and not, for example, getting an education or building a family or spending time with your family, if you just spend all of your energy on the video game, then you're too attached to that video game. And it would be better to back off from it and spend time on other important things, like on God and your career and your family and things like that. And so that's the kind of detachment that we need to cultivate, to where we can enjoy things in this world, but we don't focus on them to the extent that it causes us to neglect other things that we also need to focus on.
Marnie, how does that strike you?
That sounds good. Moderation is the key.
Indeed.
Well, thank you, Marnie. Thank you for the call. Hope we'll continue to receive calls from you. It'd be nice to keep talking with you. I'm going to go to Egbert in Lynn, Massachusetts, watching on YouTube Live. Egbert, nice to hear from you again. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. My question is, does the church have any official teachings on traditional family structure, like women being stay-at-home mothers and men being the financial provider?
In terms of church teaching on this question, the church acknowledges that there are a wide variety of different circumstances that people find themselves in. And in some situations, the church acknowledges that it's perfectly legitimate for women to work outside the home. There's an increasing need for that in many parts of the world today, especially if a husband is not able to bring in a sufficient income to care for everyone in the family. So the church does not have a problem with that. Now, one can ask a theoretical question about, what about the ideal situation? What if either parent were able to equally well provide for all of the financial needs of the family? Well, I'm not aware of a contemporary magisterial document that addresses that question. There have been ones earlier in church history that have addressed that, but they were addressing a different set of economic factors that prevailed at the time. And so one has to be somewhat careful in seeking to apply them today. I would suppose, given the emphasis that has been made on the equality of the sexes in recent church documents, that even if economic factors were controlled for so that either parent could equally well support the entire family, that it would also depend to a significant extent on their personal inclinations, because not everybody has the same inclinations. Some people of one gender may be more inclined to care for the family. Others may be more inclined to go out and pursue a career. Normally, based on just the way human nature works, men are going to tend to be the ones who are more career-oriented, and women are going to be the ones who tend more towards nurturing the children. That just falls straight out of our biology, as well as our psychology, which reflects our biology. So that's going to be the normal tendency anyway, and I'm unaware of the church having said anything particularly firm about that in its contemporary magisterium.
Thanks, Egbert. Appreciate the call. It's open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest, and as is our custom when Jimmy is on, we are sitting here looking at a full bank of phones. So your calls are welcome, but as each caller gets their question answered, a new line opens up, and you can call 888-318-7884, and we'll do our best to get to everybody. Vincent's in Iowa, watching on YouTube Live. Hi, Vincent. You got a question for Jimmy?
Hello.
Hi, Vincent.
Yes. So with the church spreading out and evangelizing with different cultures throughout history and currently, I understand that there are certain holidays such as Halloween, Day of the Dead, and currently, like with Native Americans in the United States, where they kind of the church intertwines maybe the culture with their current beliefs. So with that said, I was wondering, when Protestants attack the church in regards of holidays like Halloween, with it being pagan and the church following pagan practices, how do we respond to that?
Well, so there are several approaches. The first one is to be clear on what actually is historically the case. You'll have a lot of irresponsible claims being made, for example, about Christmas and Easter, that these are based on pagan holidays. And in the case of Easter, that's clearly not true. And in the case of Christmas, the historical evidence does not show that. So if someone comes to me with any given holiday, whether it's Christmas or Easter or Halloween or whatever it may be, my first question is going to be, where's your evidence that this is of pagan origin? And frequently it's going to be, well, I heard it, or I read it on the internet, or something like that. Now, since I study these areas, I'll come back and say, well, actually, here's what Easter's really based on. It's not based on any pagan thing. It's based on the Jewish holiday of Passover. And I'll go through the historical evidence for how we know that. And if you don't have that ready to mind, it's something that I've written about and other people have written about. So that evidence is out there and available. Another question that I'm going to have for the person is, what specifically do you see the Catholic Church doing that is pagan? And you mentioned, Vincent, things that you said the church is doing in connection with Halloween that are pagan. Now, if you look at the rites for All Saints' Day and the eve of, which is All Hallows' Day, that's what a hallow is a saint, a holy person. And if you look at the Liturgy of the Hours or the Vigil Mass for All Hallows' Day, I don't see anything pagan there. And so it's not that the church is doing something pagan. Now, are individual people doing things that you could construe as pagan? Well, perhaps. You might have someone who gets dressed up as a witch for Halloween. Okay, that would be pagan. At least it's a pagan costume. But it's not the church that's doing that. It's an individual person. And so one needs to distinguish between what is the church doing versus what are individual people doing, because individual people do not represent the church. I mean, maybe they should, but the fact is they don't. And you can't look at, let's say, every Catholic who does something they shouldn't and say, oh, that represents the church. Of course it doesn't. The church is only responsible for the things that it endorses. And if the church hasn't endorsed some practice, then the church hasn't endorsed that practice, regardless of who may be doing it. The next thing I would be likely to discuss with such a person is what is wrong with the thing. Just because something may have precedence from before the time of Christ in pagan cultures, that doesn't mean it's wrong. Prayer has precedence in pagan cultures before Christ and before Judaism. That doesn't mean praying is wrong. The question is, are you praying to God or not? And so there's a fallacy called the genetic fallacy that judges a thing based on where it came from, and it's a fallacy. It needs to be avoided.
Vincent, thank you for your question. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour. It's open forum. Our number, 888-318-7884.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
Why is it wrong to help someone commit suicide? Don't people have a right to die with dignity rather than being a burden to others? Does the Church teach that the terminally ill must be kept alive by machines for as long as possible? In 20 Answers End-of-Life Issues, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, helping you unravel the controversies and confusions surrounding euthanasia, assisted suicide, and the rights of patients in our uncertain healthcare future. 20 Answers End-of-Life Issues is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the Church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, and our guest is our own senior apologist, Jimmy Akin, who's the author of two brand new books, 20 Answers, The End Times, and another book called The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. Both of them available from Catholic Answers Press. But perhaps the thing Jimmy is getting most widely known for these days is Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. And this Friday, new Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World will drop. It's about how turkeys are actually an invention of space aliens, and he provides proof that that's not true. But
that's not true.
What is coming this Friday? Will there be a Thanksgiving weekend edition?
There will be. It'll be a weird question show. So we'll be taking weird questions that you and I have dealt with, Cy.
All right, very good. Weird questions coming on
Thanksgiving Friday.
A weird little corner of the internet called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Not just one of the great things about, and maybe you as a family might try it this weekend. Pick an episode. Maybe it's the Weird Questions episode, but this has become something that families are enjoying together. Teenagers and their parents, and younger folks and their parents. a fun part of the internet.
I have been startled at how young some appear to be. There's one fan of the show, a mother, who wrote in and said that her family was having a discussion around the table, and her 4-year-old said, "We need to think more like Jimmy Akin." It's like, wow, that's an impressive 4-year-old.
That's a cool 4-year-old too, and it's one of those cool things because this is one of the problems with our society is a failure to think, just to take positions instead of think.
And that's what the show is about. It looks at mysterious subjects, but then it applies critical thinking skills to them.
All right, next up on Catholic Answers Live, open forum, Caleb in Long Island watching on YouTube Live. Hi, Caleb. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hey, Jimmy, how are you?
Doing okay.
So I was reading the book of Sirach the other day, and it spoke about how honoring your father and mother and giving alms could atone for sin. And I do remember something in the book of Tobit also saying that same thing. I was wondering whether that kind of violates what we believe as Catholics about the concept of grace.
No, it also, you'll find incidentally the same sentiment expressed in the book of Proverbs. So it's not just something you find in the Deuterocanonicals, you find it in the proto-canonical books like Proverbs as well. We have to distinguish between a couple of different types of atonement. In the Old Testament, the type of atonement that they are principally focused on is not the forgiveness of the eternal debt of our sins. In the Old Testament, they don't have as clear a picture of the afterlife as we do, and they're much more focused on what happens in this life. Like, will you, if you do something bad, will that cause your crops to fail? Or will it cause you to get sick? Or will it cause you to suffer a military defeat? And so they're principally concerned with avoiding temporal calamities, things that would happen in this life. And God, because every people has an awareness that they've done things that are wrong, and they want to find some way to remedy the effects of that. And so God gave the Israelites ways that they could say they're sorry to him. And that included things like sacrifices at the temple, because they had an agrarian economy that was based around farming and animals. They could take an animal that they would otherwise keep and use for themselves and sacrifice it and give it to God as a gift to say, I'm sorry for what I did. And that's the basis of a sin offering. Similarly, there were other things one could do, like give alms to the poor. That's the almsgiving atones for sins, or doing various other acts of love and kindness as a way of saying you're sorry for your sins and you want to be right with God. And they're focused on temporal atonement, atoning for things that could have an effect in this life. They're not really focused yet on atoning for things that have eternal consequences. As we move along in the Old Testament, though, there's a growing awareness of the fact there are eternal consequences for actions in this life. That is clear, for example, in Daniel chapter 12, where Daniel is told about how there will be ultimately the resurrection of the dead, with some being raised to everlasting life and others to everlasting shame. So there are clearly eternal consequences to sin that are coming through by late in the Old Testament. And by the New Testament, the focus has shifted. And the New Testament authors are almost, not exclusively necessarily, but almost exclusively focused on the next life and the eternal consequences of sin. And it's made clear there that Jesus is the way that we are forgiven of the eternal consequences of our sin. And whatever the effects that the blood of bulls and goats had in sacrifices, it didn't take away the eternal debt of our sins. As the author of Hebrews says, the blood of bulls and goats could never take away sin. only Jesus Christ takes away the eternal effects of sin. And so consequently, the focus shifts in the New Testament away from the temple sacrifices and other things, and it focuses instead on Jesus Christ, who is our ultimate deliverer. But notice, in both cases, whether we are being forgiven for something that has temporal effects, or whether we are being forgiven of the eternal effects of sin, it's God's grace that does it in both cases. And so in the Old Testament, if you offered an animal sacrifice to say you're sorry to God, or if you took care of your elderly parents to say, God, I want to be right with you, or if you gave alms to the poor because God wants you to do that and you're sorry for your sins, in all of those cases, the temporal atonement in those cases is still something that is up to God. It's up to his grace. And he didn't always accept sacrifices. There are places where God says no to people who have offered sacrifices to him because their heart is still not right with him, and they're still doing bad things they haven't repented of. And so consequently, it is up to God and his grace, and he promises that if we sincerely repent and we approach him on his terms, he will be merciful to us. But it's always a product of God's grace. It's just being manifested on different levels, the temporal and the eternal, and we're saying we're sorry and we want to be right with him through different external means.
Caleb, thank you. Open Forum. Jimmy Akin up next. Kyle in Texas.
Oh, by the way, before we move on, I also want to point out the Old Testament sacrifices and so forth obviously pointed forward to Jesus Christ, prefigured what he would do.
Kyle in Texas, watching on YouTube Live. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is on the Immaculate Conception and its dogmatization, if that's even a word, of it. So, you know, in the early church, the church fathers spoke very highly of Mary and that she was conceived without sin, like Origen or Saint Athanasius. But if it was so popularly held that Mary was indeed sinless, why did it take until the 18th or 19th century for it to become dogma?
One of the things you find when you study church history is the most essential, well, you find a couple things. One of them is questions often get settled infallibly only when there's a major controversy about them. And the two recent Marian definitions, the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption, that wasn't the case. They're kind of outliers in that sense because there was not a major controversy in Catholic circles on either of those points at the time that they were both defined. Earlier on in church history, there was more of a discussion. I mean, you had theologians like Thomas Aquinas, who, even though he thought Mary was free from original sin from the moment that her conception was finished, which he thought was some time after what we would consider her conception today, he thought that there was a period before her conception was finished where she was subject to various effects of original sin that later theologians concluded that she wasn't. So there was more of a discussion of that, but it never became a big, sharp controversy. The other thing you find when you study the history of how doctrines tend to be defined is the most important ones tend to get defined first. So if you look at the history of the ecumenical councils, the very first council, or First Nicaea in AD 325, defined that Jesus is God. And the Second Ecumenical Council, First Constantinople in 381, defined the Holy Spirit as God. And then you have a series of councils that define the relationship between Christ's human and divine natures and so forth. And all of these are very important truths. The Second Vatican Council talked about a concept called the hierarchy of truths, where even though everything in the hierarchy of truths is true, because it's a hierarchy of truths, some truths are more central to the faith than others. The fact that Christ is God and that the Holy Spirit is God, and that Christ has a human nature and a divine nature. These are very central truths. In fact, they're even part of the gospel. But other truths that God has also revealed, like angels exist, and some angels are called cherubim, and Mary was free from all stain of original sin, those are not as central. They're not as high up in the hierarchy of truths. And so there was not as pressing a need to define them early on, and that's why it took later. So between the fact that there was not an intense controversy over the Immaculate Conception at the time it was defined, and also the fact that it's lower down on the hierarchy of truths, that's why it wasn't defined early on.
Kyle, thanks. We got to take a quick break.
One more thing. It also, in order to define the Immaculate Conception precisely, you also have to wait until a certain stage in church history to be able to articulate that, because the concept of original sin is a later way of expressing a biblical truth. But the term original sin and its precise meaning is post-biblical, so you had to wait for those concepts to get defined before you could say, yeah, that adequately captures what Mary did not have.
Thanks again, Kyle. Appreciate it. Advent begins this weekend, and we've got a very special ebook for you, and it's free. Visit shop.catholic.com and download your free copy of the ebook, Day by Day, Advent Apologetics. It has lots of great answers to questions that will undoubtedly come up during holiday gatherings, so be ready. Download your copy today. Look for the button at the top of the page at shop.catholic.com.
Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN, communicating the faith.
The best way to practice not really being able to fully celebrate in other people's successes is to go to what you're grateful for in your own life. So when someone next to you is having a great success, you immediately go to, Lord, I'm so grateful I have my health, I have my husband, I'm grateful I have a roof over my head. And all of a sudden, everything becomes just perfect.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, open forum. Jimmy Akin, our guests, all the lines full. We'll just keep moving here. Thomas in Quebec City, Canada, watching on YouTube Live. You are next. Thank you for waiting, Thomas, and thank you for calling from Quebec.
Hey, hello.
Hey.
I'm the guy that called the other day with Tim Staples.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember me?
Yeah, we were. Well, you got through somehow, Tom. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Okay, so my question to Jimmy, hello, Jimmy, by the way.
Howdy.
My question to Jimmy is, I was speaking about Lent to my priest because it's in a couple months, and I was just asking him some questions. There's one thing he said, I was wondering, Jimmy, you seem like a pretty knowledgeable guy, so I would assume, He said that to Lent I wasn't obligated to only fast from one thing. It doesn't have to be one central thing. It could be small little things all together for because he told me Lent is for it's for spiritual health, which I agree. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the question is, can I fast from multiple little things, or it has to be one thing, like food for 40 days, or like video games for 40 days, or hobbies for 40 days? I fast from that, or it can be small little things.
All right, Thomas.
So since you're in Canada, I would have to check exactly what the regulations are in Canada. I know what they are in the United States. In the United States, Catholics of the Latin Rite are required to abstain from one meal and a little more on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. In addition, we're required under ordinary circumstances to abstain from meat on all Fridays of Lent. So we have to fast on 2 days, Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, and we have to abstain from meat on the Fridays of Lent. Now, each National Conference of Catholic Bishops sets its own rules for what applies in its country, and I don't know what the Canadian regulations are. I know where I'd look to find them, but I don't have them in front of me. Assuming that you fulfill your whatever the required fast and abstinence is in Canada, you would then be free to add to that additional forms of abstinence. For example, many people here in the U.S. and elsewhere in the world have a custom of giving up something for Lent, like I'm not going to eat chocolate ice cream, and I really like ice cream, or I'm not going to play video games, and I really like video games, or I'm going to go off Facebook, or whatever it may be. So people will deny themselves things that they like as a form of spiritual self-discipline, but that's a matter of custom. It's not a matter of law, not in the Latin rite of the church. And so it's up to you whether you go beyond the minimal requirements that the church sets and do anything in addition. And consequently, it's up to you what form that takes. Some people may choose to give up something every day of the week but Sunday. And since it's the Lord's Day on Sundays, they're going to let themselves have the thing they enjoy to celebrate the Lord's Day. You know, that's a legitimate thing to do. Other people might say, no, I'm just going to go all through Lent without it. But it's up to them. And so consequently, if you have fulfilled whatever the Canadian bishops have determined applies in Canada, and you want to go further, you can go further, but it's up to you how going further works. If you just want to say, I want to deny myself a bunch of little things, but I'll decide at the moment rather than pre-setting this one thing I'm going to deny myself, that's perfectly fine. As far as church law is concerned, it's up to you. If you find it spiritually helpful to abstain from various little things with no preset schedule, and that'll help you grow closer to God and build spiritual muscle, that's fine.
Thanks, Thomas. I hope that was helpful. It's Open Forum. Jimmy Akin, our guest this hour. Up next, from right here in Rancho Cucamonga, California, Joseph, watching on YouTube Live. Joseph, you got a question for Jimmy?
Yeah, my question. Yeah, hello, Jimmy. My question has to do on the rapture of the church. I don't really believe it. A lot of people preach this rapture thing, and I don't see it that way. Can you explain it? What exactly is going on there when he says, I'll be caught up to meet the Lord in the air and all that stuff? Is it the way they believe it?
Well, so we're talking about 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and in context, Paul is assuring the Thessalonians that the day of the Lord has not yet happened and their departed loved ones will not miss out on this. And so he tells them that when Christ returns, the dead in Christ will rise first, and then all of us who are still alive will be caught up to be with Christ. And if you look at the context, both here in 1 Thessalonians and especially in 2 Thessalonians, where it comes up again, where he talks about the day of the Lord and our assembling to meet him, it's very clear he's talking about the second coming at the end of the world. He's not talking about some additional coming more than 1,000 years before the end of the world, which is what people who use the term rapture normally mean. That term is commonly used in a school of thought in Protestantism known as dispensationalism, although it is used by some others. And they envision this being caught up to be with the Lord as something that will happen more than 1,000 years before the resurrection of the dead. And then, according to most theories of this, Jesus will then go back to heaven and take people with him, then come down again after a few years, reign for 1,000 years on earth in physical form, and then we'll have the general resurrection. That's not the picture that Paul paints in 1 and 2 Thessalonians. Instead, he envisions us meeting Jesus in the air, and then Jesus proceeds to raise and judge the dead.
Joseph, I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you very, very much. There's lots of information on the rapture at our website, Catholic.com, if you'd like to continue your reading there. Let's go now to Emma in Hayden, Idaho. Hi, Emma.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
Jimmy, I drank the Kool-Aid. I believe I'm Catholic.
Awesome.
I made a
Congratulations.
list, like you said. Thank you. Yeah.
I remember this conversation. Jimmy suggested you making a list?
Yeah. and it was the Eucharist that didn't nothing matched up on the other side. And I remember asking you my last question about Mary. I have no idea what I asked you, and I have no idea what you said, but it pierced my heart, and I knew.
Oh.
And I'm at this place where I'm really lonely. I don't know anyone that's Catholic here. I don't know how to tell my family. My whole network of friends is there. Everyone is from my church. Every single close friend that I have, and I guess I'm hurting right now. I don't know how to make the transition.
Well, I would suggest a few things. The first one is you don't necessarily need to tell everybody right now that you currently know. I mean, you're still in a kind of transitional period. It can make sense. This is all still pretty new to you. It can make sense to let things settle so that you're more comfortable, so that you build some more Catholic identity and are more confident, and that'll put you in a position to be able to share it with those who are close to you later on. But you don't need to do that immediately. That doesn't need to be the first thing that you do. Instead, I would suggest getting some additional friends who now hopefully you'll be able to keep friendships that you already have with people in your church. It's great to have those friendships. I'm not suggesting you abandon those people or cut them off. You can continue to interact with them. I would just maybe hold back on discussing your Catholic beliefs until you're comfortable discussing them. But you can still hang out with your family and friends and enjoy their company and receive their affection and be affectionate towards them. All that's fine. I would, though, also begin working on the transition to being Catholic. And part of that involves, starting to go to a local Catholic church and, letting them know I'm interested in becoming Catholic. Now, because of COVID, that may or may not be practical for you right now. There may not, but that would be a logical next step, starting to go to a Catholic church, learning, settling into the rhythm of Catholic life, even if you're not officially Catholic yet, but going to Mass, saying prayers with Catholics, meeting people at that church, getting new friends. Also, there's a lot of Catholics online. And so, like if you were to go to the Catholic Answers Facebook page, for example, you could interact with people who are fans of Catholic Answers online there. There are other Catholics. I mean, I know there are people on Facebook who watch the Catholic Answers live video stream all the time. And Cy sees their comments, I see their comments, and they interact and they talk and they support each other. You could become part of that little online community built around Catholic Answers Live and meet the people who hang out there in the chat. So there are various ways, and I know they'd be very encouraging to you. So those would be some things that I would suggest as logical next steps. I also just want to express my own sympathy because I've been through the transition and from being an evangelical to being a Catholic, and it does pose some challenges in terms of, well, who do I tell and how do I tell and when do I tell and how do I build new friendships and things like that, and how are people going to respond? So I've been there. I've had to go through all those things. And despite the challenges that period posed for me, I can say very sincerely that it was all worth it. And I'm sure it will all be worth it for you too.
Emma, thanks for the call. I will let you know that folks are already welcoming you over there on the Catholic Answers Facebook page. If you want to check in and say hello, we're on the air for another hour, and they will be there. And lots are expressing their prayers for you as well. It's something, Jimmy, that for a person like me, it's not something that we think of because, we're raised in the Catholic Church. But there's a cost for many people to come into the church, a pretty heavy cost.
And Jesus indicated to us that there would be a cost for following him. And it's still, though, going to be more than worth it. As Jesus himself says, no one who's abandoned father or mother or brother or sister shall not fail to receive 100 more, both in this life and in the life to come, because you become part of this additional community of love and support in following Christ.
We are going to continue with Open Forum. Jim Blackburn will be here with us next hour. There's going to be just one line open, although no, sometimes people drop during the break, frankly, so you can give it a try during the break. The number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. I'd encourage you to get our free ebook, Day by Day Advent Apologetics. You just go to shop.catholic.com and you download your free copy of that ebook. We want you to have it. And while we've got Jimmy here, once again, I'll let you know two brand new Jimmy Akin books, 20 Answers, The End Times, and The Words of Eternal Life, True Happiness and Where to Find It. Both also available at shop.catholic.com. Jimmy, have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to you and all the listeners, Cy.
Yep, thanks. I'm thankful for you, Jimmy.
Likewise.
All right, we'll see if Jim Blackburn shows up. I'll be thankful for that, too. We'll come back in a couple minutes and continue this open forum right here on Catholic Answers Live. I can relax. We're in good hands this hour. Jim Blackburn here to continue Open Forum. Jim Blackburn of long association with Catholic Answers, and a very fine apologist and author, the author of a whole bunch of 20 Answers books here at Catholic Answers, and also 101 questions and answers on divorce and annulment. Did I say that?
101 quick questions with Catholic Answers on marriage, divorce, and annulment. It's a long title.
It's in the ballpark, Jim.
You were close.
Jim, welcome back. It's nice to see you.
Thank you very much. It's always great to be here.
And there's like 1 million people on the line, but I heard there's something you want to tell us about, so I'm anxious. I'm anxious to hear what it is.
But just something I've been working on that I'm kind of excited about, and maybe it could be helpful to the callers. We're heading into the time of year when the holiday season, so to speak, from Thanksgiving, Advent, and the Christmas season, that families get together like they typically don't the rest of the year, or at least more commonly, you have more family members together, and that oftentimes sparks conversations about faith. And from my years of working at Catholic Answers in the Q&A department, where I've supervised the Q&A department for a long time at Catholic Answers, we found that this time of year was very busy for people calling in saying, my brother said this, I didn't know how to respond to him. What can I do? And not everybody has the opportunity to call into the radio show. And, since I've not been in Catholic Answers in the office for many years now, I've continued to do this sort of Q&A. And now that Catholic Answers isn't actually offering that anymore through the apologist line and such, I decided I'm going to go ahead and offer this. So I've set up a little website, and I've got a couple of other apologists who are volunteering to help me out. And we're going to just open it up, and people can call us or email us or write us, or however they want to handle it. And we're going to help them out with their questions. We're going to do this. We're committing to do this through this season. And if it works out, we may just keep that up for longer term.
Wonderful. So. Are the other apologists as good as you, Jim? Because
they're much better. I wish I could tell you who they are, but
congratulations on that. What a great offer to make to people that you can just ask your question. Wonderful.
And the way to do it, the best way I can say to do it is we've set up a little website. It's called CatholicQuestions.com. Just go to CatholicQuestions.com. There you can actually ask your question right there on the website, or you can you find our email address, our phone number, our mailing address. I mean, it's all right there. I know over the years, some people prefer mail, some people prefer email, some people want to do it right there when they're on the line. They want to do it right then from their phone or their computer. So we're offering to do this in a number of different ways, even by telephone. If they call, they're likely going to get a voicemail, but just leave a message, and one of us will get back to you, hopefully within a day or two, maybe the same day. And but we want to be sure that this 2020 has been a difficult year for all of us in so many ways. Maybe this will help in the year on a happier note. Yeah.
I hope it does better than your last website, Give Jim Blackburn $1. That did not take off. Very few people signed up to give you $1. But
I didn't get $1. I didn't even get a single.
You didn't get a single buck? Oh man, that hurts.
No.
Let's go. Good for you, Jim Blackburn. Now, see, people are like, well, should I trust this Jim Blackburn? Now you got a whole hour to try him out, see if he gives good answers.
There we go.
Because we got about 1 million callers on the line. Let's go to Roger in Boston, Massachusetts, watching on YouTube Live. Roger, thanks for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Jim Blackburn.
Hi, gentlemen. My question was regarding, so I'm a Catholic, but I was having difficulty with scriptural interpretation of a passage in James where it says that God is without shadow or change, and how you can reconcile this with God changing his mind in the Old Testament. For example, repenting against doing punishment to the Israelites numerous times. How can we reconcile the fact that God can't change, and yet sometimes he does change his mind in the Old Testament?
Okay, this is actually Roger, a great question, and people have grappled with this. It's not a question that we haven't heard before. The essential thing, really, I think, to understand here is, what do we mean when we say God doesn't change, or what does God mean? When He is unchanging, and then how can that then allow for us to see, say, His dealings with the Israelites in the Old Testament, and how can it allow for that at the same time, which seems to be change? So the key to it is understanding what we mean, what theology means when we say God is unchanging. And in essence, what we're saying is He's outside of time. God created time. He is an eternal being, the only eternal being in three persons, and He is He doesn't have a beginning or an end. He doesn't have a cause that brought Him into existence. He is existence. He's been around for eternity. And that's kind of a simplistic way. I recognize there are a lot of theology resources out there that will try to explain this in better terms, and in terms that are sometimes fancy terms. But in essence, what we mean when God is unchanging is we're speaking about His eternity. Now, that doesn't mean that because God created time, God can't interact within time, but from our perspective, it might appear as though God is changing. From God's perspective, in eternity, every moment is what's sometimes termed an eternal now to God. Every moment, we could say, is equally present to God at any point in time from our perspective. And in that sense, God doesn't change, because every moment of time, whether it was from the beginning of time to the end of time, is already present to God, and is part of that really eternity for Him. So while He may change from our perspective and in our dealings with Him in our finite minds over time, that's not how it is for God. He is in eternity, and when we understand what eternity is, as best we can with our finite minds, we understand that everything is present to God simultaneously in an eternal now, in an eternal moment, and therefore God doesn't change. He's unchanging in that sense. So, Roger, I realize that maybe seems like a simplistic answer. There are a lot of resources that go into a lot more detail on this. I'm sure you can find a lot of those at Catholic.com, and I hope that helps.
Thank you.
At least.
Thank you, Roger. We actually have to take a quick break, so we will head off to the break. Let me just check how many lines are open at the moment. There's just one line open, maybe about to be two, 888-318-7884. Everybody who's on the line, just hang on the line, though. We are going to get to you. Did you know that you can now get all of our current School of Apologetics courses as a package deal that will save you 50%? Visit the School of Apologetics category at shop.catholic.com right now to find out more. Beginning apologetics, the Inquisition, creation out of nothing, and moral apologetics, all in one package to maximize your savings. Visit us today at shop.catholic.com.
Hang on, we'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Prayer changes everything. We read in sacred scripture that when we come to God in prayer, He changes our lot. It isn't so much that the circumstances change. It is that we change, and therefore we see the circumstances differently. Prayer does everything for us. It is indeed the air that fills our soul, just as the oxygen fills our lungs. We can't do without prayer. To do without prayer means we languish and we die. God wants us to have life and to have it to the full.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jim Blackburn, still a long-haired hippie type, but has neatened up the beard. I will say that. You've neatened up the beard since last we spoke, Jim Blackburn.
Thank you.
Did you get tired of it, or was it just...
There was a purpose behind it. I'm not going to go into the details. But
I didn't know it was a mystery. All right.
The purpose came and went, and so the beard went too. The long hair was part of the same thing. I just haven't gotten it cut yet. I've just been kind of having fun with it.
I like it. I think the long hair is a good look for you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Si. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Some people just look really good with long hair. I think it works for you. Does it give you any extra strength or any other superpowers or anything like that? Or
I haven't noticed that yet, so I'm hoping one of these days it will.
888-318-7884, the number. It's open forum. Jim Blackburn is our guest. And up next from Fort Perry, Canada, is Sean. Sean in Fort Perry, Canada. Go ahead with your question for Jim.
Hello, Si. Hello, Jim. I'm calling because I'm confused about the authorship of Daniel. A lot of, I guess, modern commentaries suggest that it was written maybe 100 years before Christ's coming. And I think, unfortunately, that part of the reason people say that is that there's a skepticism about anyone's ability to predict the future, even if they're guided by God's grace to do so. And so they're saying the things that Daniel predicted 600 years before Christ, they'd already come true by the time the book was actually written. And even the one of the best and most faithful translations of the Bible that is available for Catholics, it's called the New Catholic Bible. A lot of people would not have heard of it. Even it has some more liberal notes, although it's not as bad as some of the other ones.
So who wrote the book?
Daniel?
Yeah, who wrote Daniel?
Yeah, and Sean, this is something that down through the history of the church, and really even in Judaism before the church, the book of Daniel, the authorship has always been attributed to Daniel. There may have been some questions about that to come up from time to time, but it wasn't ever seriously challenged until modern day. And I would say in the last, say, 100 years, as historical scholarship has gotten better, it has caused to come into question some of the things that, well, if Daniel wrote this, he should have known, better what was happening in history. I don't have the specific historical details in front of me, but this is probably more common than the argument that from prophecy, and that to say, well, it had to have been written later because he couldn't have prophesied that he couldn't have known that was going to happen. God could give Daniel the gift of prophecy, and Daniel could prophesy. So I wouldn't hold on to that as an argument for the authenticity of the authorship of it. But looking at some of the historical arguments about the authorship of Daniel, I can understand how people today, scholars today, would take a look at it and say, well, maybe there is a question here, and that we should really consider, and not hold fast to the idea that this was penned by Daniel himself. And by the way, this isn't the identity of the author is not a church teaching, so a Catholic can have an opinion about this. And what a lot of Catholics have gone to today is a recognition that the authorship of Daniel, the original authorship of the original manuscript of Daniel, in its original form, was Daniel. However, as you mentioned, 600 years before Christ would have been when that would have been written. There could have been variations of that, before it was canonized, variations of it in the first centuries or the last centuries before Christ. And say around a century or two before Christ, when the version of Daniel that we have today came about, it could be that that version of Daniel had other people's hands in it, and even though Daniel was the original author of the book itself, the redaction, as scholars would call it, the redaction that was finally accepted and the redaction that came into the Catholic Bibles is something that may have had other authors' involvement in. So it's okay for a Catholic to recognize that. I think historically we need to recognize Daniel certainly had a part in it. I certainly believe that Daniel was instrumental in the original authorship of the book itself. However, the version that was finally canonized, I also can see the arguments for the fact that other authors were involved in it. There was the final redaction is something that involved more than just Daniel. And I'll just leave it at that. I hope that helps, Sean.
Thanks, Sean. You wonder if, like, when you get to heaven, is there a section for people who wrote the Bible? And then, like, there's some guy who just changed, like, one line to, under the inspiration of God of the book of Daniel. But, hey, that person's an author of the Bible too, right? So they get to sit in that section.
And that's actually an important point to make, that if that final redaction included authors in addition to Daniel, and they were being guided by the Holy Spirit as well.
Yeah.
In what it is that they were trying to get across and a point in writing it. Now, if there are apparent historical errors, well, there's a human aspect to this as well. But the inspiration for what it is that they intended to convey in their writing or in their redaction of Daniel is something that would have been guided by the Holy Spirit, and then the final version that came into our Bibles is certainly inspired.
Thanks very much for the question. Let's go now to Emily in Brooklyn, New York. Watching on YouTube Live. Emily, go ahead with your question for Jim Blackburn.
Hi,
Emily.
Thank you so much for taking my call. So, my friends and I have recently found ourselves having many conversations with people about Vatican II, and some people express strong distaste of it, and others who love it. And I see good intentions on both sides. So I'm just really in a confused stage of not knowing who to believe and like how much information I should take in from each. So I just really want to know, like, how can I discern better what information to take in from each side, and where can I find honest information on
about the Second Vatican Council? Before Jim answers, if I may ask you something, Emily, you sound like a young adult. Are you a young person?
Yes, I'm 20 years old.
Yeah, because the reason I asked that and I wanted to clarify that is that this is something that we see more and more of, that there is a generation that of young folks who are being raised, especially since the end of the pontificate of Pope John Paul II and maybe the end of the pontificate of Benedict, without any confidence in the Second Vatican Council. As a matter of fact, confidence in that council is being broadly undermined among the young. So I just wanted to establish that, Emily, and thank you for your call, but let you know you represent a lot of people when you ask that question, a lot of young people. And also, I just wanted to put a heavy burden on Jim Blackburn's shoulders not to get this wrong.
Well, that is a heavy burden. I want to also clarify, Emily, are you talking about, when you mentioned Vatican II, are you talking about the understanding of Vatican II, the teaching of Vatican II, or are you talking about, was the council even a valid council? I'm wondering, are you speaking with sedevacantists, people who don't believe Pope John the 23rd and Pope Paul VI were even valid popes and all of that? Or are you speaking with people who do recognize the validity of the popes and the validity of the council, but they understand Vatican II documents one way and other people understand them another way? And is that the confusion that's coming into play? Emily,
I've talked to literally literally all kinds of people on it, but my main confusion is just, like, how do I know God's voice in the teachings?
Okay, in the teaching of Vatican II. Then what I would recommend that you do, Emily, is are you familiar with the word hermeneutics? Are you familiar with that term?
No, I'm not.
Hermeneutics
No.
is it's a term that essentially means it's a method or a way of understanding something. It's a way of interpreting something. It's a way of when we look at a document, say from Vatican II, what is the way that we should be looking at it and trying to understand it? And the reason I bring that term up is because this isn't a new issue that you're dealing with, Emily. It's maybe new for you, but it's been around for a long time. And in Pope Benedict XVI's pontificate, this was something that was being dealt with even at that time, and he addressed it. And he said that when we look at the Vatican II documents, we need to use what he called a hermeneutic of continuity. He juxtaposed that against what he called a hermeneutic of rupture. And what we see happening today is and have for the last 50 years, we see some people who look at the documents of Vatican II and think, see, Vatican II changed the teaching on this. I don't have to believe what the pre-Vatican II taught. I am now a post-Vatican II Catholic, and it's something completely different. And that's what would be called a hermeneutic of rupture. Pope Benedict was very careful to explain that when we read the documents of Vatican II and we study them and we understand them, we must do that with an understanding of what the Church taught before Vatican II and understand these documents within that context, because many of the teachings that some people suppose changed with Vatican II are teachings that the Church has no authority to change, teachings that have been handed on to the Church, to the magisterium, that the Church is there to safeguard and protect. So if we're understanding a Church teaching from the Second Vatican Council to be a change, to be a rupture, to flip upside down something that the Church had taught before and teach just the opposite, then we're misunderstanding it. And if we go at the documents of Vatican II with that method of understanding, with that method of study, a hermeneutic of continuity with the constant teaching of the Church, it's going to help us clear away those ideas that there was a rupture in Church teaching that came about with Vatican II. The Catechism of the Catholic Church mentions that some of the teachings of Vatican II were intended to teach what the Church had always taught, but in a new way, in a modern way that people could understand. One example the Catechism gives of this is the teaching of what does the Church mean when it says outside the Church there is no salvation. This is a big one that comes up, and many people think that before Vatican II, the Church taught that Catholic Church is necessary for salvation, and after Vatican II, the Church didn't teach that anymore. And that's just not the case. If we go to the section of Catechism on that particular teaching, it mentions that Vatican II taught the same thing that it had always taught, but taught it in a positive way. The Church had gotten into a very negative way of teaching it, a very harsh way of teaching it, that if you're not Catholic, if you're not part of the Church, then your salvation is in jeopardy, and because all salvation comes only through the Church. But during Vatican II and after Vatican II, the Church taught that same thing, but said it in a more welcoming way, saying that all salvation comes through Christ and through His Church. All salvation comes through it. But we recognize that there are people who are imperfectly joined to the Church who may be saved. It will still be through Christ. It will still be through the Church. And this is consistent with the constant teaching of the Church. But when it's expressed in a more positive way, it becomes something that's easier for, say, a non-Catholic to understand and embrace. I recommend an article I wrote right along this line. You can find it at Catholic.com. It's titled something like the 20th century apologetics roller coaster. Put in those words at Catholic.com and you should find this, the apologetics roller coaster of the 20th century. And Emily, I think that'll help maybe when you're talking with your friends about Vatican II, it'll help give you some better understanding historically of what happened at Vatican II and why some of the teachings of Vatican II could seem different than what had been taught before. But if we understand them with the hermeneutic of continuity, we're going to get it right and not be on the fringes outside the correct understanding.
And
so I hope that helps them.
And it is a valid council of the church in which you can place your confidence and be joyful. And if you haven't read Lumen Gentium, the main document of the council, read it. You'll be amazed. You'll say, I want to belong to that church. Emily, God bless you, sister.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas is one of the most courageous leaders in the church, known for his outspoken support of unborn life, Orthodox faith and morals, and reforming Catholic institutions. In his groundbreaking new book, Light and Leaven, he offers a forthright perspective on the state of the church today and calls on the lay faithful to meet its challenges boldly, touching on topics including parish renewal, the centrality of the Eucharist, the need for prayer and silence in a noisy and distracted age, and the battle between good and evil in the church and world. Bishop Strickland's wise insights and evident love for souls will inspire and edify you. To order your copy of Light and Leaven, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's Open Forum. Our guest is Jim Blackburn. And, well, there's two lines open now. I was going to say the lines have stayed full, but you can actually, there's a window here where you can get in if you got a question for Jim Blackburn. 888-318-7884. And you can ask anything about the Catholic Church, whether you're Catholic or not. By the way, we love when non-Catholics call. We're happy to talk with you. Even if it's a challenging question, I'm happy to turn all challenging questions directly over to Jim. So 888-318-7884. Tyler in Jasper, Alabama, watching on YouTube. You're next. Hi, Tyler.
Awesome. Hello. First off, I want to say I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you.
So my question...
Me or Jim?
My question comes from...
Like, who would you say more, me or Jim? Like, if you're a big... Now, Tyler, you don't have to say. As a matter of fact, it will hurt my feelings if you do. Go ahead with your question for Jim.
So, with the Council of Chalcedon, I was arguing with an Orthodox apologeticist the other day, and I, of course, cited the famous quote where everyone stood up and says, Peter has spoken through Leo. But he argued that at that council, they also would say that, or the Patriarch of Constantinople was also shared in papal primacy. So how do we argue papal supremacy to an Orthodox Christian using the early church councils?
Okay, using the early church councils, that's a good place to go on that. Let me recommend something, Tyler. There is well, I would recommend not just the councils, but I recommend the church fathers. And the church fathers, many of them were involved in the councils. But there are Jimmy Akin wrote many years ago a series of tracts for Catholic Answers that were called The Fathers Know Best. And he took, you might be able to see on my desk behind my credenza behind me, I have copies of several of the volumes of the Church Fathers and Jimmy's book as well, because Jimmy's book, The Fathers Know Best, were those tracts. He kind of rewrote them and added to them and made a single book out of them. And in those tracts, he goes through both what the Church Fathers had to say and the early councils of the Church had to say about various different topics in the Church. And he's got a couple in there about the primacy of Peter, about Peter's, the papacy in general. And so I'd recommend that you start there. As far as quoting a specific church council, that's actually where I would go, and I don't have one of those in front of me at the moment, but I would go to Jimmy's tract on that, or his article, or his chapter in his book, and look that up. In fact, I'm sure that if you just go to Catholic.com and type in primacy, and then look for the Fathers Know Best tract, you'll find that. I generally don't really start there, though, because the primacy of Peter is something that really was established from the beginning of the Church. We didn't have an east and a west lung of the Church, as it has been called, until really much later in history. And down in the first 11 centuries of the Church, the East always recognized and was part of the Catholic Church that was headquartered in Rome. And the successor to Peter, the first pope, who was seated in Rome, was recognized with very little question to be the supreme, not just the superior bishop, but the supreme one above even any Eastern bishop. And it wasn't until this break, really, that we start to see this question of supremacy, and where we have the East saying, well, we recognize that Peter is such an, or that the Pope sits in the chair of Peter, but we have, and he's got a certain supremacy over the Eastern patriarchs, but he doesn't have authority, the authority to teach, and the magisterial authority. And of course, then we have the East falling away from the church councils, recognizing only the first 7 councils, and the Catholic Church continues down and with over 20 councils over the history of the church. My first thought for you is to go to Jimmy's book, or actually go to Catholic.com and look at primacy, and specifically look for Jimmy's chapter on the primacy of Peter, or the tract titled "The Primacy of Peter," and it's going to be one of the Fathers Know Best tracts. So maybe you could help add to that.
No, I can't. No, I thought that was
another resource, maybe. I know there's a tract.
Once you get them to Catholic.com, there's a million things there. I mean, I don't think off the top of my head, no, I can't think of another resource.
There is another tract at Catholic.com about it's just titled Eastern Orthodoxy, and it explains how, during the early centuries of the Church, the Eastern Orthodox churches were Catholic, every bit as much as the Western churches were Catholic. And it wasn't until this schism that occurred 1,000 years ago that we started to have a lot of these arguments come up. And so, if we just go back and look historically, we can see that that's what is a rupture. As we talked about before, that's what the rupture is the East's not any longer recognizing the not just the primacy of Peter, but the supremacy of Peter, and to start denying that at that time, that's going to be a change in Christian teaching that is a rupture with historical teaching.
Hey, Tyler, thanks very much for the question. Appreciate it. Jim Blackburn's our guest. Up next is Nita in Hot Springs, Arizona, watching on YouTube Live. Nita, you there with us? Hi, Nita.
I appreciate your taking my call. Okay, my knowledge of the Bible is very limited, and it's been about, for the last 10 years, I've considered myself Christian. Okay, yesterday on the Vortex on Church Militant, he was talking about, mainly the fraud in politics now, and how Catholics are really, it's their duty to fight all the fraud and to fight evil. But Jesus also said, turn the other cheek. And I'm having trouble reconciling that, how it doesn't contradict each other. Or anyway, could you please talk more about this? I'm confused.
Yeah, Nita, you are one of about 1.6 billion people on the earth confused about this in the Catholic Church right now. It is a time of struggle and tumult, and so you are not alone. Jim, how do you help this make sense?
Yeah, when Jesus mentions turning the other cheek, we can think, I guess, that he expects us to just be a doormat and to allow people to do whatever they want to do to us. But we also can recognize that if that's how we understand it, that's contrary to other things that Jesus said, and it's contrary to the way that God brought up Israel. Certainly defending themselves, certainly and through Christ, defense of the innocent. So there has to be, we have to understand both of these ideas in harmony with each other. So how can we turn the other cheek if we're not just laying down and being doormats? And I think the way that I would best understand that and explain it is that we certainly can choose and want to choose to be generous with other people. When Jesus says turn the other cheek, he mentions if someone takes your cloak, give him your shirt as well, or these kinds of things. And I think what Jesus is telling us with that sort of teaching is that sometimes people might resort to doing something harsh, and we can recognize that there are people in need, and we can try to do what we can as Christians to help these people out. Now, that doesn't mean that we allow them to commit serious evils in the world, and we just lay down about that. For example, we're never going to turn the other cheek when it comes to, say, abortion. Killing of an innocent child is something that we're never going to say is acceptable. Or you killed this child in the womb, go ahead and kill the mother too. Would that be turning the other cheek? This is obviously I'm being facetious, but the idea of turning the other cheek must be understood in a nuanced way, that we want to be generous with other people and help them out, and not just immediately return evil with evil. But at the same time, when there is evil in the world, we need to combat that as we best can with our laws and with our in our own lives. We want to bring up our children, teaching our children the correct side of morality, these kinds of things. So we can do both. We can turn the other cheek in a certain sense when people are in need, and they may reach out in a way that's that even sometimes could be an unethical way. We can try to help them out and gain their confidence, gain their trust, and then hopefully use that to bring them closer to the Lord and bring them into a good relationship with Christianity, and hopefully they will eventually embrace that. On the other hand, when horrendous evils are being committed and our laws are allowing it, we have to stand up against that and say this isn't something that we're going to just lay down for. We're not going to turn the other cheek on issues of abortion or issues concerning the family, the sanctity of the family.
But Jim, also part of her question was, what about within the church? She was also talking about, what about, like, are we supposed to be fighting the corruption in the church, or what are we supposed to be doing about that?
Yeah, And I assume there has to be some part of this comes from the election that we just recently had, and that you have Catholics on both sides of certain issues, certain moral issues, and some Catholics are saying other Catholics are bad Catholics, and vice versa. And we do have to understand also that there are some evils that are what we would call intrinsic evils, and no Catholic, no priest, no bishop, no Catholic in the pews can ever accept those actions as being morally acceptable. Abortion is just a prime example of that. Homosexual acts, another example of that. Just to cite two that are really, big today. There are other issues, however, that while we will all agree that the poor need to be fed, the hungry need to be fed, the poor need to be clothed and housed, that there needs to be some way that immigrants can come into our country and whether it be tear down the walls and just freely allow them to come in, or a way that requires certain legal aspects that requires them to come into the country legally. Catholics can disagree. We'll agree on the fundamental bottom line that yes, we need to care for these people. We might disagree on how best to care for them, and I think that's where we have a lot of disruption, even among hierarchy in the church. Some bishops having one position, other bishops taking another. Some bishops saying the wall is a good idea. The others saying that we need to tear the wall down. Catholics can take different positions on that and say, I think this is how we best do what we're both trying to accomplish, and that is, say, allow immigration in this particular issue, when we're talking about the wall. Allow immigrants some way to come into our country and assimilate into our country. So while one person might have one view and another person may have another, we can disagree on what the best approach is, but we need to recognize, hopefully, we're all agreeing on the bottom line, and that is that we do want to help those who are in need. So what I would recommend is try to discern between whether it's an approach to solving a problem, and those approaches can be wide and varied, and Catholics can take different opinions on them, or is it the bottom line that we're trying to accomplish? And if you've got someone who is going against, say, a church teaching on an intrinsic evil, and there are priests out there I know of who do that, that is the type of thing I would challenge the hierarchy about, and the type of thing that we should see the hierarchy challenged about. If the hierarchy, and I'm including priests in the hierarchy because they're commonly the ones that in the pews we hear the teaching from. Right. So if we hear a priest teaching something that's clearly contrary to the doctrine of the church, then that's when I think it's time to stand up, Nita, and say, no, this is not okay. It's not acceptable. On the other hand, when we have a priest, recommending a certain approach to a common bottom line, we can graciously disagree with that priest, but we're not at a position where we can say he's acting contrary to church teaching. So I hope that helps.
Nita, thank you very, very much. It's Open Forum. Jim Blackburn is our guest. We've got a great way for you to save money on Christmas shopping, but you need to act fast. The deals go away at midnight tonight. Today only at shop.catholic.com. We're offering the very best deals with our popular 2 for Tuesday specials. It's a great way to stock up on gifts for friends and family and save money at the same time. That's 2 for Tuesdays today only at shop.catholic.com.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
The World Over with Raymond Arroyo. Coverage as seen through a Catholic lens.
All people of faith and sincerity need to awaken to this and protect this fundamental right of religious liberty.
Expert analysis.
Does Revelation judge history, or does history judge Revelation?
Stories vital to people of faith.
It's part of our faith that comedy and tragedy naturally go hand in hand.
Delivered to your inbox every week. Sign up today. Go to EWTN.com/worldover.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Oh, by the way, assistant producer Marie and anyone else who might be newly married, I just want to help you out with a mistake that I have made in the past. You got to take that turkey out of the freezer 24 hours before you plan to put it in the oven. All right, I'm just saying right now. I know, Marie, what is it? It's not going to be turkey this year because it's just you and David, right? So it's going to be cereal. You're having cereal? Oh, okay. That's not really what she said, Jim. Oh, did you do that your first Thanksgiving? Oh, you're on your own, husband and wife. This is going to be fun. We'll have Thanksgiving. Oh, I was supposed to take this out of the freezer 24 hours ago. So I like to give that 24-hour warning to people now. Darren, you on it? All right. Dante and Mobile Out.
Good story, Si.
You sound so enthusiastic about it. That is literally damning with faint praise. Faint praise is what I meant to say.
I apologize.
No, that's all right. It's just my feelings. Let's not get too upset about it, Jim. Dante in Mobile, Alabama. You are what number am I pushing for Dante? You got me all flustered, Jim. Dante, go ahead with your question for Jim Blackburn.
Sure. Hey guys, I'm 24, and when I was in middle school and high school, I had a best friend. We were both Catholic. We grew up Catholic. We went to Mass together. We got confirmed, or he got confirmed. I got confirmed a little bit later. But my question, a year ago, he asked me to be a groomsman in his wedding, but he wasn't. He and his, I guess, wife decided that they weren't going to be practicing Catholic anymore, and they decided to have the wedding ceremony out on the beach without any permission from the bishop to, do it outside of a physical church building. I told him that I couldn't participate, and it kind of sucked. But I'm wondering, could I have participated in the wedding, or could I have gone, or should I have? I didn't go, but I just didn't feel like it was right for me to kind of approve of the wedding ceremony the way it was going to happen. So I was wondering if you could talk more about that situation.
Yeah, and Dante, your friend puts you in a difficult situation, so I recognize that first. And I realize it was a tough decision to make. Personally, I think you made the right decision. I'll explain why in just a moment. But for anyone who may not understand the dilemma that Dante was in, the law of the church, the code of canon law of the church, which we as Catholics are bound by, those laws are just as important, if not even more important, than, say, the laws of the state of California for Cy and me, and the laws of Alabama for Dante, and the federal laws for all of us. The laws of God's church are equally, if not even more important to us. And one of those laws is very clear that when a Catholic is getting married, and that a Catholic must either marry according to the Catholic form of marriage, or get permission or a dispensation, depending on whether he's marrying a Christian or a non-Christian. He needs to involve the church in that. Dante, I'm assuming that he just ignored the church altogether, didn't consider the church at all, because you mentioned that he wasn't going to remain a Catholic. Do you know if he married a Christian or did he marry a non-Christian woman? Do you know, Dante?
I'm
Dante still
not
there?
100% sure, but I'm still here. I'm not
Okay.
sure 100%, but I think she was Christian. I think she might even been Catholic, but I know for sure he was Catholic.
Yeah, right. So if he just ignored the laws of the church, the church is going to tell us that this was not a valid marriage. And if the church isn't going to recognize the marriage as being valid, that means God's not recognizing the marriage as being valid. I certainly can't recognize this as being valid. I can understand, Dante, why you wouldn't either. But your friend is the one who put you in this position. And how can you – I don't know how you approached it with him. Hopefully you were able to maintain the friendship and try to maybe continue to be a good example in your friend's life. But I wrote a couple of blog posts for Catholic.com a few years ago titled, "Should I Attend the Wedding or Not?" And there's part 1 and part 2. And I bring out all of the laws of the church in this and explain from my perspective why I wouldn't want to support someone who's doing something contrary to the teaching of the church when he's clearly bound by those laws. Just like I wouldn't support someone breaking a federal law or breaking a state law, especially a serious law that would involve, say, the federal government not recognizing his marriage or the state of California not recognizing his marriage. Well, if the church isn't going to recognize his marriage, we can say God's not recognizing his marriage, and I couldn't recognize it either as valid marriage. I'm not saying that there won't be some good to come out of the relationship, maybe wonderful children and a wonderful friendship and such, but it will not be sacramental. It's not valid, so it can't be sacramental either. Sacramental being a valid marriage between two baptized people. Since this isn't a valid marriage, presumably it would be wouldn't be the subject of a sacrament either. So it's a difficult situation that he put you in, Dante. I know that when someone decides, well, I'm not going to be Catholic anymore, they just stop paying attention to the laws of the Catholic Church, which, quite frankly, still bind them universally. They bind us. It would be like somebody saying, "I'm not going to abide by the laws of California anymore, but I'm going to still live in California," or I'm not going to abide by the laws of the United States. If you want to move out of the United States, I suppose you could do that, but there's nowhere you can move out of the Catholic Church. It's universal, and once you're a Catholic, you're bound by the laws of the church. So, Dante, please go to Catholic.com and look up the "Should I Attend or Not?" And I think you will you'll be provided with some ammunition that might help you explain all this to your friend in a charitable way.
Thanks, Dante. Mike in Manchester, New Hampshire. We have 1 minute left, so you got to say your question real quick, and then we'll see if we can get you an answer. Go ahead, very quickly, with your question.
Okay, great. Yeah. So real quick, the question boils down to what is the definition properly of a saint, and why do we call certain angels saints also? For example, Saint Raphael the Archangel.
Okay, fair enough. Why do we call angels saints, and what's the definition of a saint?
Yeah, well, a saint is just simply anyone who's holy, and we know that in the early church, St. Paul, for example, calls those who had come into Christianity saints, living people, living human beings. He called them saints. We don't really use the term like that anymore. Today, and down through the history of the church, we've just come to reserve that word for those who we know are in a permanent state of holiness, and that would be those who we recognize to be in heaven, and that would include, of course, the angels. So saint, if you think of it as meaning a state of permanent holiness, might help understand why we would
because angels are definitely in a state of permanent holiness.
Absolutely.
And actually by their choice, too. It's not like by an accident. They had a choice. They could have...
They had a choice, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, at their creation to holiness or not.
Jim
we
Blackburn,
have a lifetime to decide that.
Right. And make the right choice. If you're listening right now, make the right choice. Go for holiness. Jim Blackburn has been our guest. You can find his new work or his new project at CatholicQuestions.com. Jim, thank you very much. It's always great having you on.
Thanks for having me. God bless.
And tomorrow we got the game show. First of all, we'll do Obstacles to Catholicism with Carlo Broussard, and then the Catholic Answers quiz show. It's the pre-Thanksgiving edition. See you then.